Before we get started, I want to announce that our next Following the Fire book club book will be A Church Called Tove by Scott McKnight and Laura Barringer. The subtitle is Forming a Goodness Culture That Resists Abuses of Power and Promotes Healing. That will be episode 25, which comes out on August 11th. And we're really excited that our guest for that episode will actually be one of the authors herself, Laura Barringer. So grab yourself a copy, give it a read, and join us on August 11th. Now, on with the show.
And I have been searching.
Welcome to Following the Fire. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the wilderness. Just like Israel followed the pillar of fire and smoke, we want to take a new look at our beliefs and just follow him.
And like Israel, we get it wrong a lot, we get lost a lot, but we're doing our best to go where God leads us. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Steve.
Don't you know it's all I have? But even on my heart.
Well, welcome back to Following the Fire. Today is a special day. I'm super excited to have David Hayward with us today. Welcome, David, also known, you may know him better as the Naked Pastor.
Right. I was going to say, who's David Hayward?
Who is this guy? Yeah. The Naked, maybe I should have said the Naked Pastor, alias.
Yeah.
Mild-mannered, but when he takes the glasses off, suddenly it's like, oh, it's the Naked Pastor. But when you turn back on, mild-mannered David Hayward.
That's right. I am mild-mannered, actually.
So you may know Naked Pastor from, I discovered your art on Instagram through my brother. You have cartoons that I describe as the far side for deconstructing Christians. You know, lots and lots of images that are provoking, including images of Jesus series.
Yep.
And art, the Sophia series, and much more. I feel like I'm not even. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, there's a lot. I do a lot of creativity stuff. Like I do watercolor paintings as well, and images of Christ, Sophia, like you said, cartoons on a daily basis, writing, and then just other kind of drawings. So that might not be cartoons, might not be art, or painting or whatever. So I just keep creating every day. I enjoy it. That's what I do full time. And but most people know me as Naked Pastor through my cartoons. That's right.
And you, just to put it in here, you've got NakedPastor.com. You can find probably most of your stuff, including a guide to deconstruction. Email that you send out.
You can find me. Yeah, NakedPastor.com is pretty much the hub of everything I do. Cool. And there you can find my books and my cartoons and prints, and I've got some merch, and courses and other things going on. So, but that's where you can find me, NakedPastor.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you could start off by kind of telling us how, like, a bit of your story, your background, what led you to,
right,
to where you are now.
Well, some would say Satan. I've been doing Naked Pastor since about 2005. I started blogging. I bought the URL Naked Pastor because I was pastoring a church at the time. I was a pastor of churches for about 30 years, and I wanted, there were a lot of bloggers out there. Blogging was at its peak. And I wanted to show people what the life of a real pastor was like, really honestly. So I wanted them to see behind the curtain, and not just me talking about my sermons and the teaching and the church growth and the wonderful worship music and all this kind of stuff, and my wonderful hot wife and, my amazing
smoking hot wife
and all this kind of thing. I wanted them to see behind the curtain, to see the conflict in the church, the financial struggles, my frustrations, my financial struggles, my doubts and insecurities and fears, and my questioning and all that kind of thing. So that's why I use the word naked pastor. It's basically me being honest and open and transparent, vulnerable, no adornments. You're going to see it as it is. So that's basically what Naked Pastor is about. Now, when I left the ministry in 2010, I had a tough time deciding whether or not to keep the name because I wasn't a real pastor anymore, according to some people. But other people like, no, keep it, because basically even though you don't have a local congregation, you're kind of doing what you did online. So I've decided to keep it, and because I do kind of love helping people along their spiritual journeys, and that's what I do. But in 2005 or 2006, there were some, like, I love a good cartoon. I've been an artist my whole life, as far as I can remember, and I thought, I'm going to try to do a cartoon and see what happens. And I did, and it sucked, but I thought, what, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to do a cartoon every day until I run out of ideas. And I thought I might last a month, but here I am,
Wow.
16 years later, still drawing cartoons and publishing them, and people are buying them, and a lot of them are known around the world. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. I used to teach a lot of classes at our church, and I used several of your cartoons for slides of, I remember an older one with the two views of church and God.
Oh yeah.
The God being squished inside the church, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that they were related at some points, but yeah, your stuff is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of my most popular ones, actually. A lot of people love that one. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. I see, I'll be scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or something, and I'll see my cartoon being shown somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And it could be translated into Spanish or Portuguese or Russian or French or Chinese or something. And it's just, I just find it fascinating that, my cartoons some of them go pretty viral, and it's pretty neat to see.
When you were first drawing cartoons, when you first started, is that when you were still working at a church pastoring?
Yep. Yeah. So I started drawing cartoons at about 2006, and I left 4 years later.
Okay.
And I think they are related.
The cartoons were the possibly the cause, or the catalyst, or the vehicle.
A lot of my people, yeah. So Naked Pastor was pretty new, and a lot of my people were like, "Why would we read your blog? We already have to listen to you every week." And so I was pretty obscure, but then some of my cartoons would go viral, and I often write a caption with them, or a little bit of a post, and because I do love to write and share my thoughts. And it got to the point where Naked Pastor was becoming pretty well known, and I was starting to hear rumors, and my church was starting to hear rumors from other churches, local churches and pastors, that I was a heretic and backsliding, and I was leading them astray, and I no longer believed in God and all this stuff. And then finally I got a phone call from my superiors basically telling me that I should run my posts through them first for approval. And I knew my time was up, and sure enough, it was a year later when I left.
Oh.
Do you think you were on the path of leaving anyway? Had that not, was it just kind of a catalyst, or what?
I think I did see some signs that I always struggled with the ministry. I always did. But, and I always wanted there to be clarity when it was time for me to leave, for my own health and for the church's health. Like, I didn't want to stay until I was a wreck.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to stay until the church was a wreck. So I needed to know, I wanted clarity when to leave, and so that we both could go our separate ways amicably. But I was starting to hear rumors that people were talking, and I knew, things, my blog and everything was getting more famous. And so I knew things might get more difficult. And I love the church. it was a wonderful place for me to grow. But I found the boundary, and I'd crossed the line somehow, and I knew I either had to rein myself back in, which I'm not prone to do, or keep going and suffer the consequences, which is what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like my own, anytime I see someone that is outside of my boundary that I'm comfortable with, wait a minute, what are you doing here? I remember that's happened to me multiple times, but I know what that feeling is like what is that? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And I wonder what it is in churches or communities that kind of causes us to have that reaction sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. We're all pretty. I think it's a human problem where we're prone to conform to the group and to the standard and to the statement of faith and all that. It's not a religious thing. It's a human thing. You have it in any kind of group. You know, I know I've been in sports groups or men's groups or Toastmasters groups or you name it, and every group has this sort of unspoken code. And if somebody acts strangely or outside of those parameters, then it's going to just raise questions. I do a lot of cartoons about that, where there's a lot of pressure on us to conform and stay in the group. And it starts with our families and works its way out. And, you know, church is really excellent at that, actually. And it's got it down to a science where we are really, the pressure to conform and in order to belong is very, very strong.
So you started drawing cartoons as you were a pastor for 4 or 5 years, you said.
Mm-hmm.
How has your art changed throughout the years, and how has your theology changed throughout the years?
Well, I hope my cartoons have gotten better, because I like to use as few words as possible to convey what I mean, and I do the same with my art. So even my watercolor paintings, for example, often I'll just use one color, and just to create that impact on the viewer. And I do that with my cartoons. If I can get away with a couple of pen lines and a couple of words, I'll do it. And I won't add color. I won't do any. I'm a minimalist when it comes to that stuff. So I hope my cartoons are getting better at that, at getting more punchy. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So the better the picture, the clearer the message is. So I think my art is, I hope it's improving in that area, especially. Now, yeah, my theology has changed, obviously, of course, like it should, like we should be changing our minds. And for me, it's become more and more open. So, I remember when my deconstruction started. I remember the moment. It was in seminary when I started questioning the inspiration, infallibility, and inerrancy of Scripture. I was a Bible-holic, like seriously. I was full on a Bible freak. And I went to Bible college. And then I went to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and got a master's in New Testament studies under Dr. Gordon Fee and, all this stuff. Like I was serious. I took Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. Like I was in the deep end, whole hog. But then on the day of my graduation, I was like, oh my God, and for me, it was like the Jenga block tower where the bottom block is the inspiration of Scripture. And that had been pulled and everything hinged on that. Like if the Bible isn't true, then all my theology and all my beliefs hinged on that, rested on that. And if that was pulled, everything was shaking. But that's where it began. But it took me, my whole ministry basically for that to happen. It was like a slow glacial melt. It was kind of like climate change, just very slow with episodes. But it took a long, long time. I know some people who deconstruct overnight, not me. It took me decades. And it's because I was trying to figure out how to reconcile becoming more and more open, which I felt was my necessity to become more and more open, more and more grace, more compassion, more inclusion, more universal.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my devotion to my roots and to the Bible and to the church and to Christianity and my spiritual family and so on. So I had that really difficult time. But in 2009, I had this sort of epiphany where I need to figure out what to call it, because it was a very significant moment where I saw in an instant that we're all deeply connected. There's one reality, but we all have our own way of understanding it and explaining it. And immediately peace of mind came to me. I felt immediate peace of mind. It's never gone. And so now it was like the resolution of that lifelong conflict and angst and struggle that I was having was resolved in that one glimpse that there's just one reality that we are all a part of. We're all in. We're deeply connected on a fundamental level. But we all have our own way of understanding it and explaining it. And that makes it seem like we're divided and separated into all different kinds of camps and tribes and denominations and so on, schools. But it's just words. They're all our attempts to explain this one reality. And so that's where I'm at now, where I just assume we're all connected and deeply united. And you have your words and I have mine that attempt to describe this reality. That's my rant.
That's really, yeah.
There's so many follow-up questions I have because there's so much to that. But one thing I wondered about is, because I would say Steve and I, maybe lesser so than you, but let's say are from high school to early adolescence in that same boat, right?
Yeah.
Both of us, chose a Christian school, and so then I know I ended up majoring engineering there. So, but I know several kids who went on, what are you when you graduate college? 22, 24?
Yeah.
Who went on to get masters or doctorates in theology. And then that's a crisis for them. It ends up being the same thing because they're spending more time taking this seriously and taking a look at the Bible.
Yep.
And kind of one thing I wonder is those people that are seminaries and Bible schools equipped to handle what those kids are going to go through, and also who is it that's making those people kind of have to make a choice? I feel like that's kind of part of.
Yeah, no, they're not equipped. They don't want to be equipped. Yeah. I mean, I just was talking to a young woman just yesterday who messaged me. And by the way, if you do message me, I'm pretty good at answering. Actually, I'm excellent at answering. I talk to everybody. And so she reached out and said, look, and I'm freaking out here because I'm graduating from a Bible college and I need to sign a document upon graduation that I will never deviate from the biblical view of marriage, which is between one man and one woman. Whoa. And of course, she's gay and believes in same-sex relationships and marriage. And she's like, what do I do? I'm like, well, you can go ahead and graduate. But when you sign that document, if you ever do come out down the road, they might make you hand back in your degree. Like they might be able to have that power. It's kind of like a NDA,
Wow.
So colleges, I graduated from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, which at the time was one of the leading evangelical theological schools that had some world respect, because there were people there like Scholler and Gordon Fee and other top-notch biblical scholars and theologians. And but then after I graduated, it became even more conservative and went down the super conservative right-wing kind of path. And, they're not going to be open and embracing about a more liberal view because it wouldn't reflect their ethos or their statement of faith or their vision. So, and we see the same thing in churches. You talked about adolescence to adulthood. Like, if churches were more open to the idea of allowing people to grow through that phase spiritually, adolescence, where you rebel against authority, you question everything you've ever been taught, and you want to find your own way. If the church allowed people that same necessary stage in their development spiritually, I think the church wouldn't be in the same kind of trouble it is right now. Because people would be allowed to question and explore and find their own way and, find their way back to their church family. Instead, the only way they can continue growing is by leaving, or the only other choice is to stunt their growth and stay or hide it, right? So that's the choice the church requires, and also other things like seminaries and Bible colleges and so on.
Yeah, well, you were, not to sound dramatic, but I just kind of had an epiphany talking to you. That's why I'm like so quiet about right now, because
epiphanies are cool.
I've been wondering why I've been kind of slowly deconstructing since my time as a missionary in Germany. And I I can remember where I was standing when it all kind of started going down. And strangely enough, I was standing in the church building, and it's when I learned that the name James is actually Jacob in the original language. I'm like, well, hold on, what else has been changed? But I was wondering why did it accelerate around the pandemic time? And thinking back, I've been so extremely involved in churches, whether it's been teaching classes, being the missionary. At our previous church, I was in charge of worship and adult education, and my wife was in charge of kids education. And it's like I had to maintain this. I was pushing back a lot of things that I was starting to think through,
right,
and trying to maintain this a persona sort of the guy who's got it all figured out.
Yep.
And when we had this forced distance, it's like finally I had this time to rethink some stuff because I didn't have to have that persona anymore.
Yeah. So many people. I talk with so many people around the world who are like, I haven't been to church now in a long time, and you know what? I don't miss it. Like, I feel better, and it's like. And I knew I did some cartoons about this at the beginning of COVID, where churches are like, "Oh no, they're going to find out," and and it's true. It's too bad. I really do think that I love it. The church is my spiritual mother. I grew up there, and will always have a fond place in my heart for the church, even though it hurt me horribly and my family, and still abuses people, as we see in the news all the time. But I really do believe in the church, and it's always going to be around. I don't think we should ban the church or ban religion or ban Christianity or anything. The church is going to be there, whether you like it or not. But can we please do it in a healthy manner? If the church would just get its act together, humble itself, and let people grow and experiment. It's kind of like Lisa and I with our own kids. They're 3 adults now. They're 28, 31, and 33. When they went through their teen years, we had to sit down and make a decision. Listen, are we going to be right, or are we going to be in relationship with them? We have to make a choice. Are we going to be right all the time and make our demands and be controlling, or are we going to be, or do we want to maintain a relationship with them and let them discover their own way? We chose the second, and we're so glad we did, because now we're best friends. They found their own way. And they're grateful. They experimented. It drove me crazy. I would never want to do it again. But
sounds scary.
Stressful, very scary. That's why churches don't do it. That's why they would not dare say to their people, "You need to find out for yourself. We're here for you," because they know they're going to lose people, at least for a while. But that's the reality. So I just wish churches wouldn't require us to maintain that persona and that appearance of having it all together, and say, we're all in this together. We're all on a journey. You might be going through your adolescent period. You might be going through your infantile period. You might be going through your young adult period. You might be going through your retirement period, whatever. We're here for you as a family. And you might go in and go out and find pasture, but we're not going to try to control you. It's up to you. You can be independent. You can be spiritually independent, but we're here as a resource and as a family of support. I think the church would be doing so much better.
Yeah, I loved your recent cartoon. I think you entitled it, I Believe I'm Right. Like the crowd of people with the sign saying, I believe I'm right, and they're like stepping all over Jesus when Jesus' sign says, I believe in love.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sums it up.
I'm so amazed how some people get so upset over my cartoons, man. Even that one, I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, I shared that one on my personal Facebook page. I shared that one, and I had some people griping at me for it. I'm like,
yeah, they're like,
it's not hard.
Well, David, do you really have to go there? Do you have to push the boundary that much? Couldn't you just rein it in?
Yeah. Jesus would never be in a march carrying a sign.
Right.
And
yeah, the other people hold the signs. He just rode the donkey.
Believing in love is being right. And
right.
And people just stuck in their fundamentalism.
Yeah, what do you mean by love?
Yeah, man, I definitely get, because I'm almost always a little bit offended by your cartoons. So and usually I'm like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's this feeling that I felt at other times, and I always equate it back to the feeling of, why was it that a Pharisee was outraged that Jesus was eating with, the sinners?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, well, wait a minute, that can't be right. Why don't you go the extra step and tell them how they're wrong? Or why don't you go the extra step and,
right,
whatever? And I'm constantly having to fight that battle internally, and your art definitely helps keep there's a little bit of provocation there to like, oh yeah, that's
yeah, I'm aware of the provocation for sure. My cartoons can be very subversive and offensive, but they challenge me too. A lot of them come to me as sort of a message for me as well. So it's not like I don't feel like I'm on some kind of a soapbox preaching down to the peasants. That it's very much, I hope every time I share such a cartoon that I'm sharing my own, sense of struggle. So for example, if I'm sharing cartoons that support the LGBTQ plus community, I hopefully include myself in that group that wants to be open and inclusive and everything. And we know we're up for a challenge, and challenging the church and its abuse. I've been there, done that, and so it's something that, yeah. And there's some cartoons now that I look at and like, I'm going to archive that one.
Sure.
And because there was a lot of anger behind it or whatever, and so yeah, that's the nature of art, I guess, where it provokes something, hopefully, provokes some kind of an emotion. And that's why I like my cartoons. They somehow bypass the brain and get straight to the heart of the matter. And it happens in a split second. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I like the speed and the efficiency of that. So that's why I keep doing it.
It's definitely effective just in complicated ideas that you're, like you mentioned, how you work simply and minimally. You're distilling this into a really digestible format.
Right.
That something I really appreciate it. Sometimes, there can be orthodoxy in all kinds of spaces. There's conservative and far right orthodoxy, but there can be kind of a progressive orthodoxy as well sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because you've archived them all, but I haven't seen a single one of your pieces that's a dunk. which is dunking, meaning I'm right. People who disagree with me are all wrong, and let's kind of.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. I'm glad, because I really do. Whenever I press post, I always ask myself over and over again. Sometimes I check with other people, especially if I'm addressing like racism. I have a whole bunch of friends of color, or feminism. I have a lot of women friends, or LGBTQ plus. I have a lot of gay friends, transgender friends. I said, hey, is this okay? And I check first, right?
Right.
But then there's other ones where I feel I already have authority in, like pastoral ministry, church stuff, spiritual abuse, and other things where I can speak pretty directly and honestly too.
Yeah, and that's one thing I like about your cartoons in general. They're preachy, but not preachy at the same time. They're not preachy like annoying, but they like Nathan was saying, they hit you in the face.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, your cartoons have helped me a lot.
Oh,
with some of my processing of the whole LGBTQ plus affirming world, and I'm there now. It took some time and some study, and
yeah,
just like I love how they're black and white line drawings.
Yeah,
and then you have like a rainbow sheep or a trans-colored sheep.
Yeah,
and it sticks out so strongly.
Yeah,
just like you said, with the minimalism, it just sticks out and makes, I don't know, goes straight to your lizard brain or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's cool. I hear from, really literally, I'm not exaggerating, hear from people every day how my cartoons have helped them and all that. So I have a sign in my study, help people. And that's what I do. I just try to help people. And I love helping people. And I try to make that my point. And, I know it challenges some people. And, I have the gift of blocking when it comes to, getting rid of bullies and trolls who try to convert or preach to the community that's gathered. But generally speaking, a lot of people find it pretty helpful. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and along those lines, you do seem, at least recently, it seems like you have been putting out a lot of LGBTQ affirming cartoons. Is there a reason why right now, or is it always been that way? Or?
Well, the last church I pastored was a Vineyard church. Have you guys heard of Vineyard?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixture of evangelical and charismatic. So they're very strong evangelical theology with a Pentecostal kind of mix in there. They have very upbeat music, kind of like Hillsong. Have you guys heard of Hillsong?
Yeah.
Kind of that vibe.
Okay.
So the last church I pastored, even though I was ordained Presbyterian, I went to Vineyard eventually. And so I've done some LGBTQ plus cartoons in the past, and I've even written a book of cartoons called The Art of Coming Out. But a couple of years ago, the Vineyard in Canada voted to not be affirming of same-sex marriage, and it's legal in Canada. And it upset me, even though I'd already left the denomination and so on. I'm friends with a pastor of another vineyard who had to leave because they want to be affirming and provide same-sex marriage ceremonies. And so and I have a lot of gay friends, transgender friends, et cetera, who are really hurting because their churches aren't affirming and not welcoming them, even though they say you're welcome, but you've got to change in order to stay. And I'm just going to bat for them. As a friend, I have a skill. I can draw. I can address the issue, and I have a little bit of a platform and a voice, and I'm using that privilege I have right now to help my LGBTQ plus friends and family create a more just and peaceful and inclusive world for them. So I really do think right now this is the hill the church is willing to die on.
Yeah.
So I want to raise my voice right now. I think it's extremely, extremely important. I think it is like a line in the sand right now. And I have friends that go to a church and it's very popular and they say everybody's welcome, but they're not LGBTQ plus affirming. Although you're welcome there, they expect you to change or to convert.
Yeah.
Or and not no same-sex relationship or anything, and you can not serve in any capacity in the church. And I'm like, you do realize, don't you, that that's just not, like they say, it's only 2% of what goes on at the church, that one thing. So we ignore that and we enjoy the 98%. I'm like, no. This isn't just a side hustle, side problem, like a sidebar issue. This points to a grievous fault in their theology, in my opinion. It's not just, oh, gay people, no. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's one little issue. We'll hopefully, correct that down the road. No, to me, that points out a major flaw in their theology. And that's why I go at it. I think it's a huge, monstrous issue. And like I said, the church is willing to die on that hill right now.
Yeah.
So I want to hopefully bring some change. That's my hope.
There's that reminds me of a I don't know how recent this cartoon was where let me find it. You talked about the grievous, why isn't it just a kind of a side issue? It's in the like optional kind of stuff, and you've got a picture of Jesus talking to a crowd, and Jesus says, the difference between me and you is you use Scripture to determine what love means, but I use love to determine what Scripture means.
Yeah, man, there's so many people hate that cartoon.
They don't, Well, again, I grew up evangelical, so I get the reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so many of your really compelling cartoons are juxtaposing a church building, but then Jesus. And so many people in this in-between space or that are outsiders know what it's like for the church to not live up to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that, spiritual abuse is kind of so egregious because you're expecting Jesus people and you just get regular people or maybe sometimes worse.
Yeah.
And I think just as you use Jesus in the church in your art and the outsider sheep, what message are you trying to send? What are you trying to wake up in people with these ideas of, are we doing church or are we doing Jesus kind of? Mm-hmm. It's more of a statement than a question. But.
So one of my mentors as a pastor was Eugene Peterson, and he's just one of my heroes. And I've read all of his books and love what he had to say, and talking about how, with the church, it is what it is. You get what you got. This is the people of God. This what you've got. And so I'm not like, this isn't a real church or these aren't real Christians. They are. And you have to deal with what you got. And I'm not saying Jesus isn't present there or, that if they, I'm not like that. But for the sake of my argument, I'll personify a church building to look like it's a character, and then versus Jesus, just to make the point. And so, for example, one of my more popular ones is that Jesus and the church are sitting side by side in a counselor's office. And the church says, we just don't have anything in common anymore. And I think it's
I've seen that one.
It makes the point. It just makes the point. A lot of people are like, you know what, that's actually kind of true. But I don't mean to say, that Jesus and the church are divorced. I don't mean that, because like I said earlier, I believe we're all connected. We're all one. The Christ, the mystical Christ, the God or the divine or the ultimate source or infinite source, we're all connected. We're all one. And so, that's just for the sake of making a point. Or there's another one, another cartoon of mine where the church is driving a car and Jesus is in the passenger seat. And Jesus says, remember when you used to let me drive? And it's like people understand what I mean by that. It's not, that the church, it makes you wonder if it is going in the right direction at times, and if you know, like who was it that sang "Jesus Take the Wheel"? it's like it's kind of like that with the church. So it's just for the sake of making a point.
It's pretty powerful that one image can be challenging to the church insiders and somehow also welcoming to the outsiders.
Oh man, yeah. I have people, what's so cool? I love this actually, the diversity of the community that I'm amongst, where I have church-going believers and ministers, rabbis, imams, Muslims, Jews, following my work, but also agnostics, also atheists. And they're like, I've had some atheists reach out to me and say, I'm an atheist. I'm no longer a believer, but I really love your work, and it just makes me feel better about my past. And I just want to thank you that it's sort of healed a deep wound in my story about my relationship to the church and belief and all that kind of thing. And so I think that's cool. I really think that's cool. And then believers, church-going believers or pastors or whatever, feel challenged and want things to change. And so for example, just a couple of weeks ago, the United Methodist Church in England overwhelmingly voted in favor of same-sex marriage. And that's a huge breakthrough. And I know some of those pastors, and they've reached out and, they've used my cartoons in their services and stuff like that. So, you know what? Often things are very discouraging, but sometimes there's a light that shines through in the darkness. And I just hope the darkness doesn't overcome it. And hopefully the light will just keep increasing. And that's my hope. And I hope I contribute to that with my work.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to look at it.
It's clear that you're thoughtful in what you're processing, and I think that's a big part of it is you're not just putting out things there to upset people or to challenge. It really is this. I would describe it as light. It's here's an idea, you're not trying to win something,
right?
You're not trying to win an argument. It's more a question than an exclamation mark.
Yeah. I have dreams of publishing a book one day called Naked Pastor X-Rated, where I have a whole bunch of really naughty cartoons in there, because a lot of things happen in the marriage bed and in marriage and in relationships and things like that, and I've done some of them, where one of my cartoons where there's a couple in bed together, obviously having fun, and God's standing over them with a watch saying, "Okay, guys, time's up. You're enjoying this too much." And so cartoons kind of like that kind of, address a really serious issue like the purity culture, where you're only to have sex to have babies, and so things like that. So it'd be fun maybe one day to come out with a book like that.
It addresses that what we think COVID maybe was, and what your art represents, at least in the mind space, is the space to question something that is fine to question, but our culture said, "Thou shalt not question this thing. Thou shalt not talk about this thing." Right. Even though we all have this problem, or many of us have this struggle, or many of us, if we're not talking about it in church, or we're not talking about problems, or we're not challenging ourselves, then we don't have that space for that question.
So it's a human problem. I mean, I started drawing cartoons with question marks in them years ago, and finally I wrote a book called Questions Are the Answer. And because I really do believe questions are a way to live. Questions to me aren't a means to an end to come to a more fundamental answer. For me, questions are a way of life. It's exploring mystery. It's living in the mystery. Like the Christian classic book, The Cloud of Unknowing. That cloud is full of questions. But when you get to that point in your spiritual walk where you're comfortable with that, and it becomes a way of life, and you're used to living in the valley of darkness and the spiritual dark night of the soul, etc.
Mm.
And it becomes, your way of life, then it becomes a beautiful thing. But it's a human problem. It's not just a religious problem. You have the same thing in the military where you do not question. You have the
Right.
same thing at Amazon where you do not question. You have the same thing in science where you do not question the status quo or the dominant theories and so on. So it happens everywhere. And I know people who have joined atheist communities that say, you know what, it's just like church in there, and leave. And it's true. It's a human problem. And you probably see it at your work, where there's guidelines and boundaries and things, and you shouldn't ask too many questions. So that's a universal thing. But the church is especially good at it.
Yeah, because those boundaries are not just like cultural; they are eternal, like the eternal consequences of going across this boundary, right?
Yeah, the question means you might be wrong.
You don't just lose your job; you lose your soul.
Yeah, right.
So,
Right.
very powerful.
The stakes have been turned up. The volume's up on 10 on kind of every issue.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could tell us about your Sophia series.
Yeah. So there's 62 drawings. I started drawing them 2 years after I left the ministry. One Sunday afternoon, I was just drawing on a piece of paper with my pen and pencil, and ended up drawing a girl holding up her teddy bear to a monstrous grizzly bear that's towering above her, standing on its haunches. And I was like, Lisa, my wife, she's like, "What's that? Like, you've never drawn anything like that?" I was like, it was totally new for me. Never drawn anything like that in my life. And that was the first drawing, and that began sort of a flow of these drawings that came out over the next 2 years. And my wife's a nurse, so she was working on nights on the weekends. And so I would just pull out a bottle of wine, crank up the music to start drawing. And then whatever came to I didn't plan anything. I just let happen what happened. And so after about the 8th or 9th drawing, I realized, oh my goodness, I'm drawing my story. This is me. This is about me. Sophia represents, well, I didn't even have a name at that point. And I decided on the name Sophia because it means wisdom in Greek. And also the divine feminine and so on. And also she represented my female aspect, my soul, my spiritual nature was feminine in its expression, and it was all about her liberation. So I realized I was drawing my liberation from, being in the ministry and being in the church all those years and under the burden of religion and under the microscope and in the fishbowl and all that for all those years, and being paid by the church and struggling financially and all this kind of stuff. I realized that I was drawing my own liberation. So I put them all together and wrote meditations for them all. And that's how I came up with the book, The Liberation of Sophia. And you know what? That book is so loved by so many people, especially women. And it is one of my most proudest projects, because it kind of happened to me. And it was pretty weird, but I love it.
Yeah, that's what I liked, that aspect of the story, how you're putting this stuff onto the paper and realizing later, like, well, it's me,
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I realized I was drawing one, it was called Cave, where she's standing in front of a big black hole of a cave with rocks all around and vines, and looks really scary, and she's deciding whether or not to go in. And when I was drawing that, I was like, I knew I was drawing my journey about going into this dark, cave of self-analysis and trying to figure stuff out. Because when you grow up in the church, you grow up in Christianity, and you're in the ministry for so many years, and now all of a sudden I'm out on my own and feel totally unprepared, uneducated, unskilled, you name it. And I had to figure things out. I had to figure out who I was outside of my identity as a pastor and as a Christian and all these kinds of things. I had to figure out what I was, who I was, what I was going to do, how I was going to make money, how I was going to live in the world. It was terrifying. So this actually was kind of like a purging. And then when I drew the last one called Light, where she walks out of a door into the bright light. It was over. The inspiration stopped just like that.
Wow.
And it was over. It was done. And so was I. My healing was complete. And so it's a pretty amazing story, if I must say so myself.
That is amazing.
Really
As you were
is.
saying that, I was like, I feel like the closest I'm ever going to get to that is like a really nice spreadsheet. Like, I was like, I'm missing out. I need to take up something that I can.
Me, man. Oh,
That
yeah.
spreadsheet was me all along.
I hate spreadsheets, man. Yeah.
I just love hearing about your story and how you're approaching things in general. When you left church, have you left churches completely?
I feel like I'm still in the game, even though I might not be wearing the jersey, and even though I might not be recognized by the referees,
Yeah.
even though I might not be on any.
You're streaking. That's called streaking.
Naked pastor.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, maybe.
You're on the pitch.
I'm on the pitch. I'm on the field, but I won't go away. Right. That's part of my, haters out there is like, why don't you just shut up? Just go away already. And but I won't. I'm going to stick around. And there are, for example, just a couple Sundays ago, I preached at a church in California, a Black congregation in California via Zoom. And I had a wonderful time. And there's a church near here. It takes about an hour to drive there. The church I mentioned earlier that left the vineyard and became independent. And I'm friends with that congregation. We love going there and hanging out with the people there and the pastor. They're wonderful. And, because you can sit there and you feel no pressure. There's no pressure. There's no expectations. It's just wonderful and free. And the messages and the music is just very real, open, honest, raw, human, and unadorned, not fancy. And I like that. So, and there are churches like that around. There are some. If you and that's why I say to people, if you can find a church like that where you feel free to be who you are, there's no pressure, you're not being controlled, or there's no expectations upon you, stay, man. You found a rare gem. Enjoy it. It might not be really fancy preaching or fancy music or a lot of programs or all this kind of thing, but at least you'll have community. And you'll have a place you can call your spiritual home. That's the one thing I find with people who deconstruct and leave the church. The number one thing they miss is community. It's like terrible. They don't know how to replace it.
Right.
So it's a real difficult road for many people. So if you can't find that one church, even if it's like 20, 40 people, very plain, but they're just real and love you as you are. Seriously, don't expect anything from you, and you can just be there, no pressure. You can sit down, stand up, give or not. That's wonderful. Enjoy it.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've the feeling of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that I've really. I was surprised going through this whole deconstruction and moving away from the church that I grew up in. That my family's been in for 100 some years.
Oh, wow.
The feeling of freedom and lightness that I didn't expect to be there, because Jesus says my burden is light, but I feel like I've been carrying around this weight of expectation and extra rules and all this stuff, and now it's gone. It's like, wow, I'm not supposed to feel good about not going to church all the time.
I know.
You're supposed to feel bad, right?
Yeah. I remember the first Sunday I wasn't the pastor of the church anymore. And I happened to have a nice Cuban cigar handy. And in Canada, that we can have Cuban cigars. And it was a Cohiba. And I had a nice cup of coffee, and I was on my back deck and just smoking my cigar, drinking my coffee. The sun was shining. I thought, this is unbelievable. I was like, I just couldn't believe it. And Sunday mornings are very, very quiet, hardly any traffic, and it was just wow. It was a wonderful feeling. Of course, Lisa and I had to go through major adjustments after that because we had to figure out how to live our lives and how to be a couple because we were basically joined at the hip as a pastor and wife and kind of thing. So we went through some pretty serious rocky road, but we made it through that. But yeah, Sunday mornings are kind of special now.
Yeah, I believe you have one of your courses is about when changing beliefs changes your marriage.
Yeah, till doubt do us part. Yeah, this year.
Yeah, till doubt do us part.
Till doubt.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of marriages blow up when they go through deconstruction because they, like Lisa and I, she was 19 when we got married. I was 21, Pentecostal kids, and joined like completely on the same page. Bible college, seminary, ministry, side by side, identical and meshed, And then when I left the church, the ministry, our kids had left home as adults. We had to file for bankruptcy because we were so poor after so many years of ministry. She decided to go to university and get her nursing degree. She was 48 when she started. I lost my job, my vocation, my sense of meaning and purpose in life, my mission. Our friends, we lost our friends. It was like a major perfect storm. And our marriage almost didn't make it. There was a couple of years there where it was touch and go. And we had to figure out, we had to renegotiate. Okay, how are we going to be a couple? Our beliefs are different. Our lives are different. Our circle of friends are different. You're being a nurse. I'm being a whatever. It was a really, really hard go. It took a lot of therapy and coaching and counseling and talking and to finally figure out how to be married again. So I wrote that book, Till Doubt Do Us Part, and it is a course I'm developing as well. When changing beliefs change your marriage. Actually, that can be applied to any relationship. When you differ from the beliefs of your parents or a friend or whatever, how to negotiate those kind of treacherous waters, because they can, when you're on different pages like that, it can cause tension, conflict, and even a divorce, right?
Especially if that feels like the foundation that you started on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's what you started having in common.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but we found out, we realized, we asked ourselves, what did we fall in love with? Did I fall in love with your beliefs, or did I fall in love with the believer? And, I remember the first time I laid eyes on her when she came into the cafeteria at college. I got to admit, it wasn't her beliefs I was attracted to. And so it's, we got back to that fundamental, what was it about each other that we loved, and so it was, I didn't fall in love with what she thought. I fell in love with how she thought and so that, and how she is as a person. So, we figured that out, and now our marriage is better than ever. But that's why I wrote this book, is to help other people hopefully find their way through those very rocky times in their marriage when your beliefs are changing. So I would recommend this book if you're experiencing that. I'm talking to your audience now, but if you are experiencing that, a lot of people do find it very helpful. They're very short little chapters because they're actually Instagram posts, which allow 300 words. So there's 300 word chapters and a cartoon related to each one. And a lot of them are funny. Some are poignant. Some are sad. Some are, insightful. So, yeah. But it's a big deal. I love helping people through the deconstruction process, whether you're an individual or a couple or a church. I think it's, for me, and this is another theme in my cartoons, deconstruction isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. This is growth.
Yeah.
And to appreciate it and embrace it.
What other advice, kind of to wrap up here, what would you give to people who are going through this deconstruction process, wherever they may be along that process?
Fasten your seatbelt, wear a helmet.
That's good advice.
It used to be, like I said earlier, a very lonely road. There was no cohesion to the people who were deconstructing. We were kind of like refugees fleeing a war-torn country with just the shirts on our back and just wandering homeless and looking for a place to land, but there was no place to land. So now it's the point where, for example, the Naked Pastor community on Instagram, for example, is full of people who are deconstructing, and we just love and support one another. It's fun to be there. And so people are finding support. So that's the number one thing. And that's what I hear from people. Oh my goodness, I'm not going crazy. I'm not alone. And this is actually growth. This is a good thing. And so that's my advice is you're not going crazy. You're not alone. And this is a really good thing. Embrace it. Enjoy it.
Well, thank you so much for the advice and just for the art, the books, what you've been doing.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Really helping us and a lot of people in our shoes. So
cool.
Yeah. It's an honor to talk to you. Your stuff means a lot to me and my family and friends.
Oh,
so
thanks. That means a lot to me. I love hearing things like that because it helps me keep going. So thank you.
All right. Well, hope to talk to you sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Thanks.
All these messages I thought you wanted to hear, but it only takes a whisper.
Hey, thanks for listening to Following the Fire. If you'd like to see show notes for this episode, which includes links to everything we mentioned as well as all the scriptures, head on over to followingthefire.com and just click on this episode. There's also contact information on the website. Let us know what you think about the show and if you have any suggestions for future topics. Also, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts if you could. It really helps other folks find the show. And as always, thanks to the fabulous Daniel Wheat for the theme song and the music for the episode. You can find more of his stuff on Apple Music and Spotify. See you later.